The UK's top military officer has claimed Russia's latest generation of submarines could cut undersea internet cables, causing economic catastrophe. Air Chief Marshal Sir Stuart Peach, the Chief of the Defence Staff, said Britain and NATO needed to do more to protect the fibre optic cables. And this follows a warning from Policy Exchange think tank that these links are the jugular of the world economy and an attack would amount to an existential threat. It's worth noting these alarms are being raised against a background of an intense debate about defence cuts. But what are these cables? Alan Maudlin is the Research Director at Telegeography, a firm that focuses on international networks. Good afternoon.
Hi, hello. Happy to be here.
What do these cables carry? I mean, many people might think all the internet is linked by satellites and so on and so forth.
Right, yeah, it's actually a very common belief that we have, mobile phones and we have wireless internet and that everything is being transmitted through the air, through the sky magically somehow. We have cloud computing, right? But actually, all the communication is very physical nature and it's being carried through a series of undersea cables around the world. There's approximately over 400 different undersea cables which carry all of the internet, data, voice, emails. Everything is being transferred across these series of cables.
And it does have to be that way. There isn't an alternative at the moment.
That's correct. The satellites do exist and play a very vital role in bringing connectivity to some remote parts of the world. But to do the heavy lifting and the massive amount of data being carried, cables are the really only means to do so right now that exists.
And they're amazingly long.
Yeah, that's correct. In the entire world, there's probably about over 1 million kilometers of cable that are strung along the ocean floor all around the world.
How do you build something like that, construct something like that?
Yeah, so cables are engineered to be very reliable and resilient. They are fiber optic cables. They are they have some protection and some armoring so that they will not be damaged that easily. Near to the shore, they are buried for protection, so you can't go to the beach and see a cable lying there across the shore. They are buried for safety. But cable damage does happen still quite commonly. On average, there's a damage to one cable somewhere in the world about every 3 days. So cables, are damaged, and there are ships that go out, pick up the damaged ends, and repair them. And because there's so many cables that are in service, the users, you and me, anybody else who uses the internet, doesn't even notice an impact because the traffic is being carried by alternate cables on different routes. So if you're in a country that only has one cable, let's say, which is a very rare situation, and that cable was damaged, then you would see a big impairment in the connectivity quality. But for most countries, most users, you're not seeing any type of an impairment of service when the cable is damaged.
But it must be quite a job to repair them. Presumably they're not just lying there on the ocean floor. They're buried, are they, I guess?
No, actually, they are lying on the bottom of the ocean floor in the deeper parts of the ocean. That's correct. So they have to just use grappling hooks and go down there and pull up the cables and repair them at sea, actually.
Alan Maudlin, thank you very much indeed. Now, Rishi Sunak is the Conservative MP for Richmond and wrote the report I was talking about for Policy Exchange. Good afternoon. Hello, Rishi Sunak. Can you hear me?
I can. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How worried are you about that? I mean, how right is the military chief that this is a worrying problem?
Well, I think he's absolutely right to highlight this issue. Our way of life, our economy has come to rely almost entirely on the internet, and the infrastructure that underpins the internet are these undersea cables. And as you've been hearing, they are very vulnerable, both from attack at sea from hostile states like Russia, but also when they come to land as well in relatively insecure landing sites in rural villages.
So how do you protect them?
Well, as I outlined in the Policy Exchange report, I think there's a number of things you can do. I mean, firstly, at sea, that you could place sonar detection sensors on the cables, which would act both as a deterrent and an early warning system. I think working with private cable companies, you could install more dark cables, as they're called, which are redundant backup cable capacities in the case of emergency. And then ultimately, you need a well-funded maritime capability. Russia has been improving its own capability and investing investing in new intelligence ships and types of submarines, we need to make sure we have the means to defend against those. And then on land, these are critical national infrastructure, these landing sites. And often they're not secured in the same way we would secure a nuclear power station or a military base. So I think a review of how we protect these, what often are simple warehouses with a wire fence, potentially there are improvements we could make there as well.
But these are very long. I mean, I was amazed to learn that the longest one in the world is 24,000 miles. I had some time to sink that to sink in. 24,000 miles. I mean, how do you guard the whole length of that? You can't have Royal Navy ships or anybody else's patrolling the whole length, can you, the whole time?
No, you can't obviously do that, which is why the detection equipment and the sonar can be particularly helpful in doing that for you when you can't be there. But, I think, if hostile actors know that there are regular patrols happening along key corridors, that in itself acts as a deterrent. I think international law has a part to play. The law governing international undersea cables hasn't been updated in some years, and that needs to be done. And then there are the things that you can do closer to home. Australia and New Zealand are particularly vulnerable and have created what are called cable protection zones, which are zones around high-value communication corridors near to their countries, which they patrol with Coast Guard. There are stringent fines for entering those without permission and an extensive process to go through for any vessels to enter them in the first place. So there's certainly things we can do, which we probably are not doing to the extent we need to today.
And as I noted, that we are talking about this when there's a lot of talk about defence cuts. It's not all about that, is it? It's just sort of the military saying we're in really serious danger of an existential crisis unless we get more money.
No, I mean, this is an issue that has been around for a while. I obviously wrote this report for Policy Exchange recently, and there's some interest in it now. But I think what this highlights is there are new threats to our security which we perhaps didn't think about, 20 years ago. And some people would argue, well, do we need the same defense capability that we used to? We're not facing the same kind of foes. And actually, here's something that, we didn't have to worry about a while back, and we do have to worry about it now. Threats change and evolve over time. We need to make sure that our military evolves with those threats so it can protect us. And we hear a lot about Russia and cyber, and this is an element of that threat which you can't solve by having very sophisticated, counter-hacking software people sitting in an office. You need an actual physical military presence out at sea.
Rishi Sunak, thank you very much indeed.